the distress signal reached Earth 11 years after it was sent, traveling across a gulf of space so vast that by the time humanity finally heard it, the civilization that had transmitted it was already dying. It was Dr. Naomi Reyes, a radio astronomer working the night shift at the Atacama Deep Space Array, who first isolated the signal from the ordinary background noise of the cosmos. It took her research team 3 days to confirm what her instincts had told her within the first hour. This was not natural, it was not human. It was a message, structured and repeating, broadcast on a frequency no terrestrial technology used, and it carried, buried within its mathematical framework, something that made the hair on the back of her neck rise the first time her team's translation algorithms rendered it into something resembling language. To whoever receives this, we are the Ilvanari, our homeworld is dying, our allies have abandoned us. We do not ask for rescue, for we know none will come, we ask only that someone, somewhere, remembers that we existed. The message had been sent from a star system 400 light-years away. From a species that, by the time humanity heard their voice, had almost certainly already been extinguished by whatever catastrophe had driven them to send it in the first place. Naomi brought the translated message to the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, expecting, at best, polite acknowledgement and a quiet filing away of an academic curiosity. What she received instead, 3 weeks later, was an invitation to speak before an emergency session of the UN Security Council, where she would deliver a presentation that would change the trajectory of human spaceflight for the next 2 decades. We can't save them, she told the assembled delegates, her voice tight with the weight of what she was about to say. The signal is 11 years old. Whatever happened to the Ilvanari happened over a decade ago, and there is nothing we can do to change that outcome now. Then why are we here, Doctor? Asked the ambassador from Kenya, not unkindly. Because somewhere out there, Naomi said, there may be a handful of survivors clinging to whatever is left of their world, having watched everyone who should have helped them turn away. And I think humanity needs to decide, right now, in this room, what kind of species we intend to be when we finally take our place among the stars. Do we want to be the species that heard a cry for help and decided the math wasn't in our favor, or do we want to be the species that went anyway? The vote, when it came 3 days later, was not unanimous. But it was decisive enough. The mission that departed Earth 18 months later was called the Kepler Promise, a name chosen by public vote from school children across 43 countries, and it carried aboard it something no spacefaring mission in human history had ever carried before. A crew explicitly assembled not for conquest, not for resource extraction, not even primarily for scientific discovery, but for rescue. Captain Idris Okonkwo, a decorated former ISS commander with 22 years of spaceflight experience, had turned down 3 prestigious posts to lead the mission, driven by a conviction he found difficult to fully articulate, even to his own family. They said no one was coming. He told his daughter the night before launch, I don't know what we'll find when we get there, maybe nothing, maybe just ruins and silence, but I know what it means if humanity's first act among the stars is to prove that message wrong. The Kepler Promise was, by necessity, humanity's most ambitious engineering achievement to date. A vessel built around a still experimental, Alcubierre-style warp configuration, that compressed a 400 light-year journey into just under 6 years of subjective travel time, an achievement that would have been impossible without the desperate, focused urgency the Ilvanari's message had inspired across the global scientific community. 17 nations contributed technology, funding, and personnel. It was, in the truest sense, the first project in human history built not around what humanity could gain, but around what it could give. It carried a crew of 41 engineers, doctors, xenolinguists, and soldiers, chosen not for their willingness to fight, but for their willingness to help, whatever help turned out to mean when they finally arrived. What the Kepler Promise found, 6 years later, orbiting a dying star in a system marked only by a catalog number, was not the silence Naomi Reyes had feared. It was a graveyard. The shattered remains of a civilization that had once, by every archaeological indication the crew could gather, spanned 3 planets and dozens of orbital habitats, all of it now reduced to drifting wreckage, and a single, badly damaged world clinging to the edge of habitability, and, against every reasonable expectation the mission's planners had allowed themselves to hold, there were survivors. Fewer than 4,000 Ilvanari remained, huddled in the ruins of an underground shelter complex that had kept them alive for over a decade, following a catastrophic attack. Their own historical records attributed to a rival species, called the Thren Ascendancy. A conflict that Kepler promised Dat's xenolinguists would later piece together, that the Ilvanari had lost not because they were weak, but because every ally they had cultivated across the stars had calculated, with cold and simple arithmetic, that supporting a losing war was not worth the cost. Dr. Amina Farouk, the mission's chief medical officer, was among the first to make contact with the survivors, descending into a shelter that had not seen an unfamiliar face in 11 years. The Ilvanari who greeted her, an elder named Ves Ithran, regarded her with an expression that Amina's translation software struggled, at first, to categorize, somewhere between disbelief and a grief so old it had calcified into something almost resembling resignation. "You came," Ves said, through the halting cadence of a translation algorithm still learning the contours of a new language. "We stopped believing anyone would. We heard your message," Amina said. "It took 11 years to reach us." "I'm sorry it took so long." 11 years, Ves repeated, something in the old Ilvanari's posture shifting, almost imperceptibly. "We had allies far closer than 11 years away. None of them came at all." The weeks that followed were, by any measure, among the most complex diplomatic and logistical challenges humanity had ever undertaken. The Kepler promised DA's crew, never intended to be a permanent colonial presence, worked alongside the surviving Ilvanari to stabilize the shelter's failing life support systems, share medical technology that saved dozens of lives in the mission's first month alone, and begin the slow, careful work of determining what a future, for the last 4,000 Ilvanari might actually look like. It was Captain Okonkwo who first proposed the idea that would ultimately define the mission's legacy, not simply stabilizing the Ilvanari's dying world, but offering them passage back to Earth's solar system, where humanity had, in anticipation of exactly this possibility, begun preparing habitats within the asteroid belt, capable of supporting an alien population whose biology, thankfully, proved compatible with modest environmental modification. "We are asking you to trust a species you have never met," Okonkwo told Ves Ithran and the assembled Ilvanari Council, "based on nothing but the fact that we came 400 light-years to find you. I understand if that isn't enough, but I promise you this, wherever your people go from here, you will not go there alone, not this time." The Ilvanari Council debated for 3 days, understandably, given the wound their species carried from a lifetime of allies who had abandoned them the moment loyalty became inconvenient. In the end, it was Ves Ithran who cast the decisive argument. "We have been alone for 11 years, the elder said. "We know exactly what that feels like, and we know exactly what it does to a people, given enough time. These humans crossed an ocean of stars, on the strength of a message that offered them nothing in return. Whatever else is true about them, that is not the behavior of a species that intends to abandon us, the moment it becomes difficult." The journey back to Earth's solar system took another 6 years, during which the surviving Ilvanari and the Kepler Promise crew forged something that neither species had fully anticipated. Not merely an alliance, but a genuine friendship, built across the long, quiet years of shared travel through the dark between the stars. When the combined fleet, the Kepler Promise and 3 additional vessels, hastily retrofitted Ilvanari transports that had survived the destruction of their homeworld, finally arrived in Earth's solar system, they were met, not by the cold, cautious reception that first contact protocols might have once dictated, but by something that surprised even the mission's own planners. Crowds, real and immense, gathered at viewing stations across the planet, watching the arrival broadcast live, cheering not for a conquest or a discovery, but for a promise kept. The Ilvanari settlement established within the asteroid belt's Ceres habitat complex became, within a decade, one of the most celebrated diplomatic achievements in human history. Not because it solved every challenge of integrating 2 vastly different species into a shared future, but because it proved something humanity had, until that point, only ever claimed about itself in theory, Ves Ithran, addressing the United Nations 12 years after the Ilvanari's arrival, in a speech that would be quoted for generations afterward, put it more simply than any human diplomat had managed in the years since. My people were left for dead by every civilization that once called itself our friend, Ves said. We had learned through bitter and repeated experience, that promises between species are worth exactly as much as convenience allows. Humanity taught us something different. They taught us that a promise, properly kept, does not bend to convenience at all. It simply holds, for as long as it needs to hold, regardless of the cost. Decades later, long after Naomi Reyes had passed the torch of the Atacama Deep Space Array to a new generation of astronomers, and long after Captain Okonkwo's name had become a fixture in the history taught to human schoolchildren, alongside the first moon landing, a new signal reached Earth. Another distress call. From another dying world, another species that had, like the Ilvanari once had, concluded that no one was coming. Humanity's response, this time, took considerably less deliberation. The Kepler Promise 2, built with technology the original mission's success had helped accelerate by a full generation, departed Earth within 8 months of the signal's confirmation, carrying a crew that included, among its 43 members, 3 Ilvanari volunteers who had insisted, against every argument that their presence wasn't strictly necessary, on being part of the mission. You once told me a promise doesn't bend to convenience. Ves Ithran's granddaughter, Lyra, told the mission's captain, before departure. I'd like to help keep it. And so humanity's promise, made first to a species it had never met, sent 11 years too late to save a dying world, but not too late to save what remained of its people, continued, one signal, one journey, one rescue at a time, carried forward by a species that had decided, once and for all, exactly what kind of civilization it intended to be among the stars. You will never stand alone. Not while humanity is listening.